started since we're trying to fit in 2 different sessions today in 90 minutes. So, my name is Juliana Reiki. I am a consultant at the Global Communication Center, which is right outside the door there. I'm also a PhD student in literary and cultural studies, and I'm currently doing research on scientific posters. How many of you have done a poster session before? Okay, good, a little over half. What was it like?
It's usually very crowded with a lot of people like passing by.
Exactly, okay, incredibly crowded. Alright, were you able to see other people's posters very well? Not really, okay. Did you see amazing posters? Were they all amazing? Some were good, some were probably colossally bad, okay? And that's typical. Research posters are incredibly common, and yet it is also very common to see people not do them well. They do not highlight their work all that well in that genre. So for those of you who have not been to a poster session, here's a typical poster session where we have lots and lots of posters, people are milling about, they're trying to find research that interests them to figure out where they want to spend their very limited time. And you may or may not be standing beside your poster. Posters are difficult because they're so hard to convey your message, your complex research, succinctly and clearly, and make your poster attractive to try and hook an audience. People struggle with this task, so we're going to tackle that today. Alright, what is your impression or your initial thoughts about this poster? Too much text?
That's a lot of words.
It's overwhelming. What else?
Not creative.
What was that?
Not creative.
Not readable? Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We read the title, but then we don't know where to go next.
Exactly. Your attention is being pulled in multiple directions. Do you start with the images that are the darker images? Okay. How do you read this document? What about this one? Better. Why is it better? Slightly better? You can read it? Okay, a little bit more readable. What are still some concerning aspects about it? So much text, okay? Lots of text, and even the figures, okay, are so very complex, and they're very tiny. So even if they are crucial, it's hard to read those. Okay, so here's a vertical orientation. What do you think about this one? A little bit better? What's better about it? Less text. It doesn't seem like the great wall of text that you have to climb in order to get the information. Okay? It's not perfect, but certainly moving in the right direction. And then if we look at this one, this is a really good poster where we have, certainly there's a lot of text, that's true, but the text is larger, it's more readable, and our eyes focus on that center column. And I'll talk about why as we go through. Today, I'm going to talk to you about 3 different strategies for improving your poster. The first one is choosing an organizational design that you're probably already familiar with. The second is to cut non-essential information so that your key contribution to your field really shines. And the third is to make strategic design decisions. Okay, so those are the 3 things I'm going to cover today. The first one is layout. We want to get the most important information into the most important position. So of these 2 options, what's more important? What is more eye-catching for a poster session? The top. Why?
It's the eye level.
It's where you start reading from. That's true. Most people read in a poster, they move from the top left, okay, and they actually never get to the bottom right corner. Or actually, for you, it would be this direction. Also, if you're in more visible. If you have a horizontal layout, which is more typical than the vertical layout, think about how your vertical columns can actually help you emphasize your points. So what is the most important column in this design? We're just looking at these columns. Center? Anyone disagree? Wow. Okay, I agree. I agree. Center is most important. You can even slightly expand that center column to emphasize it even more. How many of you write scientific reports where you use an IMRAD structure? Intro, method, results, discussion. Okay, good. About half of you. All right. You're going to use that same structure when you construct your poster. And even those of you who are in the humanities, you will also use an IMRAD structure for the most part. Okay? So IMRAD stands for Introduction, Method, Results, and Discussion, and we can think about certain questions that align with those sections. So in our introduction, what your reader really wants to know is why should we care about this project? In the methods, what did you do? And the results, what did you find? And for most of you, the results are crucial bits of information. And the discussion or the conclusion, what are the implications of this work? So this is on your handout, it's on the back of your handout. This would be a standard horizontal poster format that uses the IMRAD structure, where we have introduction in the top right, because people typically start reading there from left to right. Results are in the middle column because that's the more important column. And then we have, typically we'll see discussion right next to results in the upper right corner. So here's a vertical layout that does use IMRAD, although I think it struggles. Where we have the introduction as that first paragraph, the method as the second, and then we move in a horizontal direction for results and discussion. Now, what's concerning about this poster? There's a couple things. Yes?
It looks like a paper.
It does. What makes it look like a paper? Right, you have to read it, okay? And big paragraphs, okay? So that also gives the impression that this is more paper-like than poster-esque. Also, what do you think about the results being down there? Very good, very good. And if we are moving with this intro methods, we're taking a long time to get to results. Results could also be obscured by other people milling about the poster, so it's hard to get to them. A lot of space is given to that bee on the flower. And if you love bees, great, that's the poster for you. However, I'm not sure that most people in an audience are like, bees, that's where it's at. So I think putting the results in that bottom corner aren't necessarily the best strategy, and that's certainly not a strategy we would encourage. But this generally follows the IMRAD format. Okay, so, yes?
We suggest having like a picture that captures people's attention, because otherwise how are they even going to come and look at the picture?
It really depends on your field. So he's asking, should you use a picture that kind of captures your main contribution or your topic? And it really depends on who your audience is and what your field is. In general, I would argue that your images should be your results. That your images for your results should be as big as possible, and that's what gets people interested in your project. But having something that is tangentially related may or may not work. So for example, I studied 18th century sailors for my dissertation, so there's lots of like sexy images of 18th century sailors where they're like, huzzah! And they're kind of funny, so I would put like a little one on my poster and be like, come in to the world of sailors, and probably emphasize, something else as my result. So it really depends on who your audience is, what they expect. You definitely don't want to trivialize your work by using something that doesn't necessarily fit. Yeah. Okay. So your most newsworthy contribution, if it is results, should be in that middle column. Okay? That's where people are going to tend to look. Very apparent if you have images that show your results, like figures, graphs, tables, they'll see them very clearly. If your most noteworthy thing is a new method, then by all means, put the method in the center. But it's important to understand, though, that if you're not suggesting a new method, if that's not your major contribution to your field, then nobody really cares about method. So research has shown that most people skip right over reading method sections in papers. And it's the same thing for posters. Unless you're going to really talk to that person about the research, or maybe replicate the research, or you're in the exact same, small little field, methods aren't necessarily the most important thing. You just want to know, did it work? Okay? So, most of the time, it's results, though. Yes?
Considering that the method has equations, how do we effectively depict them instead of writing the equation as it is?
Oh, that's a good question. Is it an equation that you have developed?
Yep.
I would just put the equation there and define the term, or whatever the parts of the equation are. I'm in English, I don't know what they're called, like the little letters. Okay, I'm gonna have to look up what those things are called. Variables, right?
Subscripts.
So if that is the crucial thing, that's the method you're using, then I think you should feel fine to put that in your method. But I certainly would not have like large proofs of how you developed that or anything like that. Or a series of equations would also, I'm not necessarily sure that would be the most persuasive for most people. Alright, so for most of you, results are the key thing, and you can adjust your layout to give you a little bit more space with results. So how that could work is having results in the center, and then even bleeding over into that next column if you need a little bit more room. And that's perfectly fine. You just move your discussion section down a bit. So think about this as you have options. Just be deliberate about the choices you make, understanding how your audience is going to interact with your poster, and reading strategies. So here's another vertical one, and we have this as a life-size in-person example. And this uses the IMRAD structure as well, where we have the introduction lays out what their problem is, how they're addressing that problem. Then their method is at the bottom, where they are testing, does our solution actually work? And then we have results and discussion is in a big, wide column at the top with lots of images to show what exactly the results were. So that's another example. For some of you, particularly those of you who are in the applied sciences, you may be able to use a problem solution format. Or if you're presenting at a conference where they want real world problems that you're trying to solve, you can use a problem solution design as well. So problem solution, we see three main sections there. The problem, what are you trying to solve? Okay. The solution, what did you do? And testing, verifying that your solution was actually effective. So those are the three main parts of those. And here's a real world example of that, where we have someone who's trying to attack the problem of spatial information and sound. Then we have in the middle their solution, and at the bottom, what's less important is that their solution actually worked. Instead, we have an emphasis on what their actual solution was. So the bottom is more like testing our solution, more method. All right, any questions so far? dive right into what to cut because this is challenging. We must cut content for precision. The only way people are going to walk away from our poster with any tangible information is if we distill our ideas as much as possible. In reality, you can hope that your audience will look at your poster for 2 to 3 minutes, but for those of you who have been at poster sessions, you wish someone would be there for 2 to 3 minutes, okay? So even then, you might get a 10-second brush past. So you don't have much time to really get your message across and hopefully have a conversation with someone. So we're going to prioritize content and think about content in terms of design as well. All right, take a look at this list. Which sections do you think are the most important to your readers at a poster session? Title, okay.
Abstract.
Oh, we got one for abstract. Results, introduction. Oh my gosh, we're all over the board. All right. So let's think about this. Does anyone say school logo is most important? Oh. Okay, definitely not the most important. All right. Should definitely not be the main thing. It's great if you have funding, you want to show that you've got that funding. Plus, you should acknowledge who's giving you money. Methods, as we've talked about, really not all important. You should have them, but they're not the emphasis. Okay? This is how I would divide this slide. Title, yes, very important. Introduction, crucially important. And we'll talk about why more in a little bit. Methods, not all that important. Have to be there, but shouldn't take up the most space unless they are what your contribution is. Results, very, very important. And conclusion, or the implications of your work, also really important. Things like acknowledgments or references, they should be there, but normally you see them in very small text. Why is that the case? Why are they put in really tiny, unreadable sized font? No, read them. The only time you're going to read them is if you're really interested in that research. Okay? So you will have gone through the entire poster probably. So most people are not going to get that far into your poster. Now I cut out abstract. Why did I do that? The introduction does cover a lot of that information, and the poster is basically an abstract of your research anyway. So we don't have abstracts to abstracts. That's really unnecessary. If your advisor says, oh, you have to have an abstract, then what I would do is I would say, okay, esteemed professor, let me show you 2 versions of my poster. One that doesn't have the abstract and one that does, and give them the opportunity to see it in a different format. So that way, it's not just, oh, it has to be done this way, but what actually looks best and works best for your audience. And you can make the case that, well, isn't the poster kind of an abstract anyway? So I say, give it a try. But if they're really firm, leave that abstract in. All right. So the most important of all these, as we talked about, is results. So I'm going to dive in really deep into results and how you can emphasize them. Because if you have to convey your results and a reader walks away from your poster not having any idea of what you found, your poster wasn't really that effective. Okay? So let's talk about the most important aspects of the results. From this list, what is the most important or few most important things? What was that? The graph, okay. Anyone agree with that? That would be one? Oh, okay, we've got some nods. Yes. Oh, we've got word results. Okay, do we agree? Mm-hmm. Got a couple agrees. Interpretation of results. Okay, so here's my list. Graph, and the main lessons are the interpretation. So I cut out how you collected your data. Why? It's method. It's not even results. Okay? Now I'm gonna disagree. Was it you, gentleman in the hat, who said results, or no? Where was it? You. All right. I'm gonna disagree with you, and you can tell me whether I have persuaded you at the end. Okay? So if our goal is to get people within 120 seconds to understand our results, there are a few strategies that you can do. The first one is to imagine your poster as a newspaper. So newspapers have great design. They really focus you on the most important pieces of information. So for those of you who were not up till 2 a.m. on Wednesday morning, you could just look at a newspaper and see who won. All right, you don't even have to read the paper. Big 24-point font. So they have a concise headline, informative images, short paragraphs, and potentially even subheadings. Okay? All of this guides your eye to different types of information. So here's the results section, okay, that is made up. And what I'd like you to do is think about what the headline would be for this results section. You got the caption? Okay, so rates of gastric ulcer recurrence for the year after successful healing with the, what was that? No, what did you say?
Not the old sentence, like the part of it can be the headline.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I would do the section on the right of the figure. The probability of recurrence for patients who receive therapy is significantly lower.
Okay,
And
so we have, which is basically the same kind of information, right? So we have redundancy in the content, okay? And you might think this was the main piece of information? Right, okay. If we can change this slightly, we can get that main idea that triple therapy is actually better for recurrence than the other one. This is kind of confusing. When you look at this, you're like, hey, that other thing is really good. And not in terms of ulcers, bad, okay? If we change it slightly, to actually use a newspaper heading, within seconds you have that idea. So that triple therapy reduced ulcer recurrence helps us understand that image much more quickly, and we've eliminated lots of text. So again, the previous was this, on the text, and then here we go. And we can make that image a lot more complex. So we don't have to have this 0 to 100 scale where it goes up by 50, which is kind of weird. Instead, we can actually have a slightly more nuanced graph. Okay, so again, we've got the headline, just the key finding. Want to use the text we have to have to our advantage. So this is where I would say that the word results, sometimes you have to use it because of the format that you've been given for your poster session. It may be already set, or your advisor may say, no, you have to say results. And it's up to you. Just keep in mind that there is another way. So you don't always have to say the word results, or you could say, our results indicate whatever. And that way you could kind of use it in a sentence. So we have the headline, a very quick explanation, and informative illustration. Oh, I labeled it wrong with the old graph. Ignore that. Okay. All right. Remember this gem of a poster? Okay. So I'm going to dive right into the results section, or what I think is the results section, and give you a chance to figure out how to use the headline approach to more effectively convey the information. So here is a zoomed in section, and we're going to look at the top half of this first. So that's what this is. So take a minute, see if you can figure out what the key result is. What was that? It is. It's the golden chunk. So the unsupervised techniques are very close to the supervised, something like that, okay? So even if all we do is just take that bolded section and make it the only text, the readability of this part of the document is much nicer. There's less cognitive load for your audience. So they don't have to put in as much effort, basically, to understand your research. Okay, so let's look at the bottom section of it. And this will take you even less time. It's the same author. It's exactly, oh, it's conveniently the bolded section again. And here, what I did, because this is part of that same section, I thought, well, you don't actually need a subheading here. You could just use that result and put that as the subheading. So even if you were like, oh, I still want to keep like results or something, you could have this as underneath that or further down as opposed to subheading. And then another thing that could be done here, I would have to talk to the researcher, is there a way to get rid of like the hair strands or something? Because it looks like we should only care about the blue, red, and green. So if there's a way to kind of eliminate that, to make it stand out more, or to even make this larger now that they have the space. So here they are side by side. Does anyone prefer the before version? Okay, good. This is a good test that your audience would also not prefer the before version. You have experienced what everyone else has. So the final version is much more streamlined. It's easier to get that message. And you leave the option for having larger images, which is crucial if your figures are incredibly complex. The news headline approach can be used for more sections than just results. Okay? So I'm going to show you a couple examples of this. Here's one that is the cooling effects of dirt purge holes on the tips of gas turbine blades. All right, what is your initial impression of this before you even read it? Oh, we got some nodding. I'm assuming that nodding means it's all right. Okay, so now give yourself about 30 seconds to read and see what you can get out of it. Okay, what is the main idea? So the tips or whatever actually worked. Okay, tip holes and their size corresponded to real cooling, I think. Okay. Here's another one with a vertical design. So we have a study that's discussing women in engineering and how people seek out help. So each main piece of information that they want you to understand is green, very large, and it's using that sentence headline approach. We also have the results in that upper right corner, very prominent, and we know that women reach out more than men for resources. All right, and then we have the conclusion is way at the bottom, seeking academic help optimally. What are the implications of work? That's really de-emphasized. Instead, they want you to recognize, hey, we found some startling differences between men and women in engineering. Okay, now we're diving into design. Any questions about cutting content before I move into design? Fantastic. All right. Okay. So I strongly urge people to use white space instead of boxes. So already this looks incredibly cluttered. So these boxes are non-data ink. They don't add anything to your poster. Instead, they just fill it up with useless images. Okay, that's not helpful. Instead, you want to get rid of all of these boxes, if you can. If you're using a set format that you have to use for conference, you're stuck. But ideally, try and get rid of them. And actually, my research right now is we're testing whether or not people respond better to boxes or no boxes. So we have a before and after to see what people respond to. And we're also testing the sentence headlines to see if that works. So anyway, eliminate boxes, and here is a delightful example. Okay, what's your initial impression? There's a lot of boxes. There's boxes within boxes. Okay? So, is this easy to read? No. And there's a lot of issues other than just the boxes, right? What are some of the other concerns? There's no label, so no way for us to kind of figure out what we should notice about this data. And you would certainly not do that in your paper either. Label that thing.
There's a lot of space for methods.
Lots of methods, and lots of dense text to get through. Okay. What else is going on here? Are you talking about this one here? Ah, yes. They don't have yeah. I don't know what's going on there. What else do you notice about this? Very nice. Okay, good eye. So the background color choice is non-traditional. What else about this in terms of color is non-traditional? I don't know. We do suggest people use a white background because that just gives you more pop for your text and your color options. Okay? What else about color? The images are very dark, okay, and they're small, so it just seems packed with color. Yes? What was that? No, we knew that. we obscured the name. Yeah, I thought that was kind of cute. This is what we do in writing center. We're like, how can we be clever? Anyway, what else is going on with color here that's non-traditional?
Even though the purple and white have a contrast,
Good. The purple's not the best choice. It's because it's not throughout. It's not one of their primary colors that they're going to be using. Okay? So it stands out as a little odd. There's also the ombre, which is I kind of love on a personal level, but it doesn't seem necessarily professional. So that would be something that I would really be curious about. Why the pink, maroon, the wine color, I guess, to yellow? That's an interesting color palette, even for an ombre. So that's a little cartoonish. Okay, so here's one that has a good color palette. So we suggest having 2 to 3 colors. Okay, as we see here, 2 to 3 colors. And that you use these colors strategically. So that we group the same types of information with certain colors. Okay. We can show coherence in our content. we also conveniently do not have any grid lines or boxes here. So even with the data at the bottom, there's no grid lines. And what that does is it helps the actual numbers pop a little more. It also gives them a little bit more space to make them bigger. If you don't have those grid lines, you're opening up the space a bit more. Okay. Yes?
Actually, do you think the bulk page and with the subtitle is easy for people to locate which part?
Great question. So the question is, if you have a subtitle that says results, and you have everything in boxes, does it actually help you locate the information? Okay, so certainly I can locate where the methods are so I can ignore that, and I can focus it on results. Okay? That's true, it does focus your attention. So that's one argument in favor of the results. However, you've wasted my time that I've had to read results, but it hasn't actually provided me any information. So the idea would be that if you could incorporate that word, or even if you use it, that you very quickly summarize that main point underneath that subheading. So even if you want to keep like methods or results or something, that right under that you have that main point. And the boxes, I generally think the boxes just take up a lot of space. And that you have to further restrict your text size or your image size. When really, without using them, you're just opening up your document more. It's more inviting. Just come on in. It's cold outside. That kind of impression. But so basically, I would do one each way and see what you like best. Give it to someone and have them like squint at it and see which one do you like better. And then you'll get a good impression. Yeah.
So my question is that if we don't use the boxes, then like where should we place like the white spaces? Should we put them in the margins or like between the paragraphs?
Yes and yes. All of that.
But
So
like,
you should have white space between columns. Yeah. And then you can make it slightly larger between columns than between bits of information within that column. So it's called, the technical term is proximity. So we want like things. So like everything that's in an intro, we want those closer together than they would be to like results. Okay, we don't want people mistaking our intro for results. So you can slightly extend like this white space here. It can be bigger. You see that slightly bigger than this space here. And what that's called is proximity. It gives you the idea that like things go together and unlike things are slightly further apart. You would use this for things like resumes too. So same principle. Good question. Okay. Bold text, you're going to read that first. Okay? The smaller, the lighter the text, less chance of it being read. So just keep that in mind as you are narrowing down bits of information in certain categories. Alright, I've got to slightly speed up here. So as we talked about, 2 to 3 complementary colors. So here we have one, it's a vertical format that uses the IMRAD structure, and the results are in this section. So we have the results moved up into the upper right side of the diagram. Alright, so we say use left aligned text versus justified. Does anyone know why? Oh, we have not. You know why? Or you're like, don't look at me. Well, they both start with the left. It is easier to read. Do you know why?
because like if there are like really long words in the end, and then like if you use justified type, there will leave like a real big blank space.
Yes, very good. So it changes the spacing from what you would normally see. It slows people down in their reading. We also have what we call gutters in the text. Is anyone bold? Nobody's bold? What? Alright. Well, anyway, these are like gutters, okay? I like to think my reader is going to get lost in that gutter. They're never going to make it to the end. So that's not ideal. Okay, and my quick note on text is that all caps, not necessarily the best, tends to slow people down in their reading. It also seems a little bit like you're shouting, so not the most professional. Italics consistently in research slow people down. It gives them the impression that the text is harder to read, so try to avoid that. And we encourage sans serif font. It's a little bit easier to read than serif fonts, like Times New Roman would be a serif, and sans serif would be calligraphy. And my last piece of advice is squint at your poster. Do the most important pieces of information stand out? If they do, you're golden. If they don't, go back through these steps. You can do it. All right. So I do have like another 2 minutes for questions. Any remaining questions, things that are bugging you about poster design that you must know? Yes?
Do you recommend InDesign for posters?
I've never used InDesign. I've used PowerPoint, and that tends to just work out better for me. But I would say if you can use InDesign and not be incompetent like I am with it, then I think it's probably fine. Yeah. But I have just never tried it. Yes?
How do we get good at newspaper highlighting, headline highlighting?
That's an amazing question, and that's going to be covered in the second part of our presentation. That was like the perfect transition. I feel like you're a man. Like, any other questions? Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Optimal size of font. I think it depends on your category. If you can read it from 6 feet away, I think you said 6 feet or 3 feet? 6 feet? 6 feet away, you're good. If you can't read it, it's too dense, you've got to cut more, get that font bigger. But I would say about 18 to 20, bigger, 24?
I'd say more, like my poster with the purple colorful stuff, I think that was a lot bigger, yeah.
Wow.
Can check and tell you the exact numbers.
We'll check that first. All right, any other questions? All right, great. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Nisha to talk about PowerPoints and to answer the question about how do we create these amazing